This year I feel like I went through so many math curriculums that I am going to just explode. But I'm going to talk about these and what's going on, because math is such a intense subject. I mean, like, everybody has to learn it, but not everybody wants to learn it or can learn it the same way as other kids. I have been teaching 4 of my kids homeschooling this year. 3 of them I'm really going to focus in on because the 4th one has Down syndrome, and she's like on a totally different type of learning style when it comes to math. And if you're curious about that, I'll leave a video up here that you can watch. But I do have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary schooler, and I'm going to walk through the different curricula. So I'm going to start with my youngest daughter. So we've tried a couple of different things through the years, and this year alone we've tried 3 different curricula. First thing we tried with her was the Apologia Mathematics that is fairly new. I love Apologia. When it comes to science, I'm pretty much an Apologia snob. I've been teaching 13 years at a homeschool co-op with Apologia because it's the only one that really works in that kind of setting, and I just really love them. So they're math, because math and science are very similar. I just knew that it was going to be good. First of all, I love the curriculum. I love it. I love how colorful it is. I love how hands-on it is. It's got crafts. It's got manipulatives with paper, cutting, pasting, all the things. It's great. And games. There's games in here too. I will say though, with Apologia, it's a great curriculum. Okay, don't get me wrong. It is great if your child does not need a lot of repetition when it comes to multiplication tables, when it comes to fractions and stuff like that, place values. They do a very good job teaching place values, but she needed more. I used to teach Title I math to kids, and one thing I learned is that we really got to get back to the foundations. And the foundations, of course, are going to be understanding the number line, understanding place values, then addition, subtraction, math, division, and then it builds on itself, you know, the fractions and decimals or percentiles. So I went back and I started to just assess her in those things and see what does she really have down. And I noticed that she was still struggling with memorizing her multiplication. That was really getting her stuck, especially when it came to long division. Totally understandable. I was that way too. And, you know, you just need a lot of repetition. So when a child is actually doing that long division and it's taking them some time because their multiplication facts are not strong, of course, if their multiplication facts are strong, so are their division facts, right? If they're taking their time going through that long division, first of all, it's going to take longer. Second of all, they're going to forget which step they're in and forget what they're doing because they're so busy trying to figure out, you know, how many times does 9 go into 81, right? You want to get those multiplication and that division facts down. So what we decided to do after much thought, assessing her, we decided to go with Matthew C. And if you have been following my channel, you know when I first started this channel, I was like, nope, never touching Matthew C, not gonna do it, okay? I have so changed because what happened was when I was first introduced into Matthew C and I was starting to do my evaluations and stuff for parents 13 years ago, the students that I saw that used Matthew C really were struggling on assessments, state standardized test. And that's because the state standards do not align with how they teach Matthew C. But once you get into the high school or upper middle school, because you get to the pre-algebra, everything just kind of like connects. Now see, with math, when you're going through elementary and middle school, you're doing this kind of spiral thing. A little bit of mastery here and there, but you're doing some spiral things, right? Matthew C is going to do mastery. So you're going to focus in on the subtraction and addition, multiplication, division. You're going to move through each element and you're going to master it, and you don't move on until you master it, which is actually really, I'm finding this out just from trial and error, that it's actually really good. It is good to go back and review some of those things, but I kind of feel like it does that by default. Like fractions, you are reviewing division, you are reviewing multiplication without even realizing it because you need those things to be able to do those fractions. And same with percentiles and decimals, okay? So we went to Matthew C. And I decided that we were going to go with, this is the gamma. Okay, I'm not even going to say grade levels, because when it comes to things like this, there are no grade levels with homeschooling. Like, there really isn't. You're just level. Like, we need to work on multiplication. Okay, after multiplication, we got to do division. After division, so there's a pattern there. Let's get the multiplication down good. Let's go to division, and let's aim to have all these basic foundational stuff done by the time you reach 8th grade-ish, which is when you hit pre-algebra. And that is basically our goal. So she is going through Gamma, which is a focus on single and multiple digit multiplication. And, it is fairly easy for her. She's spending more time soaking in multiplication, doing skip counting, working with the blocks that they provide, and just memorizing her facts and understanding them. And she is actually working through, so they have, chapter 1, so it's 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E. She's doing like one of these chapters a day, when usually kids might do 1A on Monday and 1B on Tuesday. She's doing all of the chapter in one day, one sitting. She might break it up between two, and then we'll throw in the chapter test or lesson test. And I believe it's called a lesson test. Hold on, it's a lesson test, because they're not chapters, they're lessons. There is unit tests that she gets thrown in there. But she came to me the other day and she's like, Mom, I got my 9s memorized. I got my 8s memorized. So she's getting excited because she's actually mastering multiplication. Honestly, I could beat myself up and be like, I should have done this like 3 years ago or something like that, right? Every single child develops differently. It doesn't matter the speed at which we learn stuff. Okay? It really doesn't matter. It's the fact that we learn it. Some kids take a really long time to learn something, but they really learn it. And when they get to my age, they may be brilliant at mathematics compared to someone who's sped through mathematics. They might not be good at mathematics, but the person who took their time and learned slower may be brilliant at mathematics and better than the other person. So don't be hard on yourself if you have to go back and really soak in a concept of some kind. All right, so let's move on to my middle school boy he's 13 right now. I mean, I guess you could say 7th grade, I'm not really worried too much about grade level. I am more worried and concerned about developmental level and also, whether or not they master something. We started him off this year with Saxon, right? This is my kid that wants to be an engineer. He's 100% sure. He's on that track. He's so great at figuring things out. He's good at coding, but not only coding, just building things and motors and that kind of stuff. He's so good at it. So I'm like, you know what? You got to know your math. Saxon's always been the math go-to. Well, let me tell you this it did not work for him. There are so many kids that Saxon, they just thrive with Saxon. I've seen it when I do these homeschool evaluations and consultations. They thrive, but there are other kids that are it's dry. Each lesson gives you so much to do. They give you so many worksheets. There's so much to do. And some parents will even do odds. They will do evens. The thing is, it was not working with my son. I will be honest, I didn't, as a parent, have time to sit with him and explain stuff. He tried to learn it on his own, but he did get the basics of the concepts down. So I took the same philosophy that I took with my daughter, where it was let's get these things solid when it comes to mathematics. Let's master certain concepts. So we started using the keys too. We are starting with fractions with him because I feel like I did the same thing I did with my daughter. I assessed him. Got to get those mastery. Master your fractions, your decimals, your percentiles before you even touch pre-algebra. Otherwise, you're going to be so incredibly lost. You do not want that for your child. You want them to understand the basics. Now, I will I do want to add this idea of puzzles and logic and all of these things that have to make you kind of think outside the box. And so what I do have for him is a critical thinking company book having to do with solving some math problems, logical problems, stuff where he has to make Venn diagrams and manipulate numbers and just games, so to speak. So I actually didn't bring that upstairs, but I'll stick a picture of it right here, and then I'll put a link down in the description box below which one it is. We really like it. It complements the mastery thing too. And because he's so dead set on that engineering field, I do get him little extra stuff here and there to kind of help him, you know, like we do crunch labs. He loves it. 3D printer and building things and just I mean, that's just his whole realm. But when it comes to the mathematics, we are doing Keys 2. Keys 2 is working for him. So Keys 2 actually has, you know, fractions, decimals, percentiles. It's kind of set up a little bit like Math UC, but it's a little bit different type of format. It almost seems like a supplement, I would kind of say, and especially since he almost finished Saxton 8-7 and he would be going into pre-algebra next year, I just felt like let's just do Keys 2. He's doing several of these worksheets a day because they're fairly easy, and I'm making sure to check everything, making sure he's not rushing through the problem, because typical boy, they want to rush through the stuff and get it done with so they can move on to do other things. But rushing through things, slowing him down, and making sure he finishes out the problem correctly. It's much easier to grade with the Keys 2 than Saxon. I was really struggling with grading with Saxon. That was a whole thing, okay? The grade system, and there's so many problems. Another thing too. And Saxon, you know, in my opinion, is not really mastery. It feels more like a spiral to me. Now, people would argue that, but just when you're comparing it to Math UC and Keys 2, it's not mastery compared to those two, because these are truly mastery. So this one right here that he's working on right now is fractions, and there's 4 of the workbooks for fractions, and then after this I believe it's decimals. I'm not quite sure. I think it's decimals. And then I think there's also 4 books, and they go through the level from, you know, beginning to advanced. So that's what my middle school 7th grader is doing, and this works for him. Saxton did not. I mean, I guess you guys kind of see a pattern maybe, because my high school is totally going to break this pattern, sort of, maybe kind of. Well, okay, let me just show you. Okay, we started off this year with the art of problem solving right here. Okay. So what happened, this is a very interesting story. My son did teaching textbooks, which I do. I appreciate teaching textbooks. It's great. I knew he needed to do Algebra 1 again. And I was at that point where we are just not going to do something that is 100% online. I needed to be involved with his math. But he was determined to be, he was like, I know I'm good at math. Math's easy. I got this. Okay. So he decided that, and I was very much allowing him to be a part of this decision-making process for his curriculum when it came to Algebra 1. And so what he wanted to do was the hardest math curriculum out there, basically, which, you know, the person that we spoke to at the booth at the convention said it is the art of problem solving. Now, first of all, I love this book for me. I was so excited to go through this. I was reading through it, and I was like learning algebra. It's very, very meaty. And the point of this book, you are actually teaching yourself algebra. It's self-led. Self-led. It's not a teacher sits down and teaches you the material and then you complete it. I mean, you could do it that way, but the purpose of it was to be self-led. And it's not easy. It is not an easy book. And if any of you are familiar with the art of problem solving, they are coming from the foundational course, Beast Academy, which a lot of people now absolutely love Beast Academy. One thing that's really cool about Beast Academy is there is a lot of critical thinking type problem solving activities within Beast Academy, as well as that foundational math. And that's what I've seen when I've skimmed through it. But it is definitely an advanced mathematics. And if he's jumping from teaching textbooks into the art of problem solving, that was like a huge jump. There's so much more about all the things that happened, but it was just too hard for him, and I get that. He was already ahead a year anyway, because 9th grade is usually when you do Algebra 1. So I wasn't too worried about that. Once again, I'm not worried about grade levels in this. However, when you do get to high school, if you are college bound, there's a lot of things you want to take into consideration when it comes to applying for colleges, okay? Usually, yes, you get like the SATs or the ACTs or the new one, the classical learning test, I think is what it's called. But they also have placement tests. They look at your transcripts. They want to know that you have a solid foundation in math. And so there are certain classes that you want to have completed by the time you finish high school. So approximately Algebra 1 is 9th grade. He was not behind by any means. And this wasn't working. So I'm not going to stress out too much about it. The only struggle, honestly, the only difficulty I had with teaching textbooks is that it was online, and that online format was just, it wasn't for him. Art of problem solving was like literally the opposite of what we were doing with teaching textbooks. So I did some research, talked to some people, asked lots of questions. And this is actually, I know I talked about my daughter doing Math UC, but this was actually when I first discovered the value of Math UC, is because I put my son in the Algebra 1 Math UC. So the first couple of weeks of Math UC were a little bit of an adjustment, and they took a little bit longer to get through the chapters and the units. But once it happened, and we did use, by the way, we used a little bit of some outside sources. There's a really good website called Flipped Math that we jumped in and used some of the videos from there and some of the problems from there as a little bit of extra credit. But once he got into understanding how Math UC taught, he just took off with Math UC. Now, Math UC actually has two different Algebra 1 courses. There's the traditional one, which that's not the one we went to. I was like, let's get the updated one. So we actually got Principles of Secondary Mathematics, which is the updated one. I'm not quite sure. I think this one has a couple more standards that aren't included in the traditional one, and I think this one is supposed to be a little bit more advanced than the traditional one. But here's the thing, it didn't matter. Like, he's thriving in this. He thrives in it. Now, I was a little bit nervous. You know, moms, we get nervous sometimes when we hear things. You know, somebody's talking about how amazing Beast Academy is and how amazing the art of problem solving is and how it's really laying a good foundation. You hear all these things and you're like, oh, did I make a mistake? And then you start doubting the intelligence of your child and all these things. And it's not an intelligence thing. It's totally a learning style thing and a developmental thing. And like I said before, every child develops differently. And some kids that are very slow to develop in certain areas are actually going to be strong in that area later on in life because they took that time to develop, okay? So I talked to another parent just for security's sake. Her son worked through Math UC throughout his entire high school career. That's what he used for high school. The kid got a scholarship into a private engineering college and now is just an engineer. He has his degree in engineering and he's working, he's making a 6-figure salary. So that to me was very, very, very encouraging. You know, I have a lot of faith in Math UC now. I feel like this is going from like 7 years ago where I was like, no, I would never touch it because I didn't see the standardized score. I mean, this is such a lesson for everybody and anyone who's listening. So focused in on what those standardized scores were showing me when kids worked with Math UC in elementary and middle school weren't doing so good because it was mastery different. It didn't correlate. Okay, it didn't connect. It didn't line up because it was taught differently. But that, I was so focused on the test and I was seeing the results and I didn't like Math UC because of it. However, in the end, they are excelling with Math UC, these kids. And just the fact that it's so good for kids that are neurodivergent because it thinks the way their brain thinks. Okay, I'm not going to get into all of that now, but just learning over the course of the years, learning that kids that are neurodivergent need that mastery approach when it comes, and also cognitive development. Sometimes kids that are neurodivergent, their cognitive development isn't that great. So they need to take more time learning this stuff. And to top all of this off, a Christian education is huge. And if you ever hear Mr. Demi speak, he is just so good. He is a Christian, he is a believer, he loves the Lord, and he serves the Lord with his heart, and he speaks about God in everything, when every speech that I've ever heard him talking, you know, I like him. So, and that's another philosophy that I have. If you like the author and you agree with their foundational methods, you agree with their, you know, presuppositions, all the things, worldview, you're probably going to like their curriculum. So connect with the author first. That's what I always say. If you connect with the author, great. You're probably going to like the curriculum. And there's so many authors out there that I have connected with over the years, and I find that I love their curriculum. And so this is definitely, I'm now a huge fan of math, you see. I am probably going to be moving my son next year into pre-algebra math, you see, because I think now that he has the foundation laid, after he finishes Keys 2, he's ready to jump into that pre-algebra, and I have a feeling he will excel. My kid that wants to be an engineer, and he's so smart too. That's my spiel with math. I know it's a long video. Thank you guys for watching. And oh, by the way, I am doing this series of what worked, what didn't work, so make sure to subscribe to this channel so you can see the full series. And I want you to see what I'm using next year, because those are the next videos that are coming out. You know, I do the what worked, what didn't work kind of review from the year, and then the what am I using next year. So thank you guys so much for listening to this, and I hope that it was encouraging, and I hope that gave you some insight when it comes to teaching mathematics in your home, and thank you guys again. Bye.